remember, I told you when we look at the idea of Romanization and colonization, it started primarily, or the mentality, Charles, started way back even from the Greeks, right? So I'm going to show you this. Go to my next slide. You remember I told you that Alexander the Great, his tutor was Aristotle. Aristotle, he had a huge impact that we even feel today. We had a huge impact on race and class that is not talked about. And he had a huge impact. The Greeks believed in this word, they believed in this concept of clima or climate. And they said that where your clima is, which really looks at where you fit on the globe latitudinally, it actually impacts your weather. So the higher you are north, the colder it is. The lower you are toward the equator, the hotter it is, and everything else. And so they believed that your clima or your climate impacted your weather and the sun's energy in your area, right? Now, here's what Aristotle argued then. He says, well, you know what? I agree with that totally. And then he argued this, that if you're in an extreme hot area or you're in an extreme cold area, it produced people that were intellectually, physically, and morally inferior. In his theory, he said, if you live too far north, that cold weather infects your intellect, your physical ability, and your moral ability. And if you live too far south, where it was too hot, it made you intellectually, morally, and physically inferior. Why did he argue that? Guess where the Greeks lived? Right in the middle. And so Aristotle believed that the Greeks were the most intellectually, morally, and physically superior race in the world. And he taught Alexander that same ideology. So the Greeks believed that due to the clima or the climate, they were the greatest people on earth. Now, I'm going to show you this. Why? And so now, and Aristotle argued that when you're in an extreme climate, hot or cold, you lack the capacity for self-government. You did not have the capacity to take care of yourself and to make decisions for yourself due to your climate. And when he saw blacks, he said that these blacks have burnt faces. They have burnt faces, and that's where we get the idea of Ethiopian from. And he says and these burnt faced people and those northern pale people, those are both barbarians. And neither one of them has the capacity to manage themselves because they're intellectually inferior. They're physically inferior. And so now, he said, this is why we should keep them as slaves. Because the reason why we have to rule them and take over them, because they can't manage themselves. And the reason why we're going to win is because we're intellectually superior and we're physically superior. So if we have to enslave them and do what we got to do, so be it. And in one of his first books called, it was Politicus, but Politics, literally, his first book, he wrote this down. He said, humanity is divided into two things, masters and slaves, Greeks and barbarians. When you look at humanity, you either look at a Greek or a barbarian. When you look at a person, you're looking at either a master or a slave. Caste system. And the Greeks and the masters are those who have the right to command. And the barbarians or the slaves are those who were born to obey. Now, how do you think this affected Greek ideology about who they were? So when you talk about we're going to Hellenize the world, it just made sense. If we're superior, we're supposed to do this. We were born to do this. We were made by God to do this. Am I making sense? You know, and so whatever we got to do, we got to do. So when the Romans came along, the Aristotle's belief, it just migrated naturally into them. Because Rome and Italy were in a similar latitude as Greece. So yeah, of course. So that's why in Romanization, we can come into your country and build another capital. And not be like, and not think, because we would say that's bold. The Romans would say that's God. And it's unapologetic. I don't make sense. So this is why in Acts chapter, I believe it's Acts chapter 4, there was a big issue because Cornelius, the Roman centurion, got converted to Christianity. So wait a minute, you got a superior Roman that got converted to Christianity? The God of the Jews. to the God of the barbarians? And he's a Roman centurion, which means you are a leader and over people. So that's why the Bible is like, Cornelius got converted. That's why they like, no, we got to write this one down. Because that was they were like, what in the world is going on? So we got to control, so we cannot allow this religion to keep happening because it's going to mess around and impact or infect some more of us. And if we're going to be infected by it, we cannot be impacted by its imagery or practices. So what we got to do is change the imagery and change the practices and make them Roman. So that, of course, Cornelius got impacted. You would too, if you saw what Jesus looked like. And you understood who he was, but the thing we know he wasn't was a Jew. So the ideology of I'm just naturally born better, that didn't start in America. It started with Aristotle and his idea of the climate theory and the idea of because of your climate and skin color, you're naturally inferior. Am I making sense? Making sense. And so now, imagine now, here's the deal. If you are now being invaded by Rome and you see all of these Europeans coming in and invading your country and taking over, is it unnatural for you to believe that they must be God's people? Because of how are they dominating? And then when they show you the picture and they show you imagery, it just makes sense. The reason why you're dominating is because God looks like you. Now, and so this Romanized, Europeanized, not just religion now, but ideology about who you are. Now, they took that and said, now let's take that around the world. And this is the process of colonization. This is why colonization was not as, it was difficult, but it was not as difficult because it had an ideology and a moral belief behind it. So when we look at colonization, the definition is this. It's the settling or of establishment of control over an area inhabited by indigenous people. Indigenous people is a $2 word. This means the people who live there. So you come into a place where people already live, and you come in and you settle and say, this is ours. Well, Dr. Moody, how would they do that? Because they believed they were superior. They believed God was on their side. They eradicated Hebrew language, and they made you believe that the biblical history started not in Israel, but in Rome. And now let's take that message and go around the world, and let's do this. The word colonize comes from the Latin word colere, which literally means to inhabit. So to colonize from the Latin sense means that we're going to inhabit. Now here's the thing. You took the gospel now that they said in Acts chapter 1 verse 8, that now you should take this gospel of the kingdom to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and what? The uttermost parts of the world. Now here's the deal. Now you can take this gospel of what kingdom? Of the kingdom of the Roman Catholic Church and our belief. And what does God tell us to do with it? Take it around the world. So now we are God's servants, and we're going to go around the world, and we're doing what the Lord wanted us to do. And he told us to do this, so we are God's men, we are God's people, and now we're going around, and we're taking this message. And listen, and we figured out, wait a minute, when we took it around the world, we found out that there's, like we said, there's gold in them there hills. Right. So the Portuguese were one of the first. When we talk about Europeanization, we're not just talking your Caucasian white person. So when we talk about Europeanization, we're talking about Europe. And so the Portuguese were one of the first, and they used remember the papal bulls or the seals from the Pope that said you are God's servant, you have God's right to go in now and enslave anybody, because all this territory, God says, belongs to you. Whatever your foot shall trod is yours. So now we're quoting scripture and operating according to scripture out of context. But you've gotten rid of the Jewish context. So now you can make it whatever you want to make it. And then because of Romanization, your priests are also politicians. So they're cutting backdoor deals saying, what you need me to write on this paper? And they're like, okay, listen, if you do this, when we bring back this money, you get your cut. I need you to stand up Sunday and preach this message. And I need you to seal this Pope and write this down. And because now we got people that are in religious positions that are not necessarily clergymen for real, but they are appointed clergymen because the church and politics have merged. Am I making sense? Yeah. So you can start seeing how this process was a lot more systematic in this process. So Portugal in the 1400s goes and it begins to inhabit all kinds of lands, and the Portuguese king talks to the Pope and gets a papal bull or a seal from the Pope that says you have the right to do this. And so now in 1414, they enter into Africa, and they're like, man, it is nothing but gold, silver, spices, and everything else. And we found out something, because this world is, because of our shipping industry is kicking off and global trade is kicking off. We found out something. We can be rich because there is economics. We're getting all kinds of goods from this place. And man, this place got it all. And you know what? We know we're blessed. And we know God's with us. Look at what we're doing. So economics now starts to drive many of the activities. And we just lace it with religion. So economics now becomes the driver. And what we call European imperialism, which means the European said the world belongs to us. And God has given us the world because we have Aristotle's ideology floating in the back of our head. So now we can do what we want to do. Portuguese goes out, Spain goes out. Am I making sense? And they grow and they begin to inhabit with the new world. Because now with more technology, that now they can use the ships and they're going to places and they're bringing back all kinds of unforeseen things. And now their economics is blowing up and it's a wonderful thing. And the Dutch get into it and they go into South Africa. And so now then Britain goes into it, and Britain goes into places like Australia. This is why when you look at those countries now, you see the accents they have. That's why although Australia is a warm, dark-skinned continent, they all speak with the British accent because they were colonized by the British. Why? Because when you colonize, you take the people, you move the people, you get the stuff, you change the language. And you feel like you are justified by who? By God.
Thank you for worshiping with us today. If you liked this message, you can find the rest at cmllcstore.com. We invite you to join us again for our extraordinary worship services every Sunday at 10:30 a.m., Sundays at 4 p.m., and Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Central, where Dr. Moody teaches how to understand the Bible, and you can get all your biblical questions answered. We look forward to connecting with you. We ask that you subscribe to The Rock ATX on YouTube and follow The Rock ATX on Facebook and Instagram to stay connected to all The Rock is doing. You can also get connected on our website at therockatx.org. Again, thank you for worshiping with us, and be blessed.